This video is going to cover the topic of histograms. Be sure the date and topic are at the top of your page. The essential question for this video is, what is a histogram and how do we create one? How do we make them? Let's start with a few facts about histograms. So histograms are a type of bar graph, so they're made up with little bars. They are a way to show statistical data. The bars that make up the histogram all represent numerical intervals, so they're not one specific number. Each interval that we make must be the same width and represent the same size, same spread of numbers. And when we're making our histogram, there cannot be any gaps in between the intervals. There's no spaces just left over in between. A very quick sketch of a histogram would look something like this, so you can kind of visualize in your head what we're going to be making as we go on to our next slide. Histograms are a way to represent numerical data. So here is a set of data. These are science test scores that I've just sort of made up here, but there's a list of scores for, I think it's 19 students. So we're going to look at this and see how we can turn this information into a visual, and that visual will be a histogram. Now, the first thing I want to look at is the range. I want to find the highest and the lowest scores. And it looks like we have a 65 right here. That looks like that's our lowest score. And I don't think anyone got higher than a 99. So when we're thinking about our intervals, we want to make sure that we cover between 65 and 99. We have to have space for those values. Knowing that I need to cover at least between 65 and 99, I need to think about how I'm going to divide this data into sort of what we call buckets or bins. And I think I'm going to use buckets of 10 numbers on a number line, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment here. Let's see if we can make a little table here. I'm going to go ahead and make an interval that starts from 60 up to 69. That's 10 numbers, right? 60, 61, 62, 63, and so on. That covers 10 numbers on my number line. And I'm actually just going to kind of be consistent here, right? So it'll go from 70 to 79 will be the next bucket, 80 to 89, and 90 to 99. Right? Now I have my numbers. I have space for my lowest and my highest. I went a little bit lower than I had to by starting at 60 instead of 65, but I wanted my intervals to be exactly the same size, right? From 60 to 69, 70 to 79. Those cover the same amount of space on a number line. Next, I need to see how many numbers fit in each of these buckets or bins. So I'm going to scan through my list here, and I see that there's one number in the 60s. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 right here. I'm going to go to my 70s, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 numbers that are between and including 70 to 79. And then I'm going to look in my 80s, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers in that bin. And lastly, this yellow is going to be hard to see, but I see in my 90s 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that's how often there was a number that fits into that interval, right? That's what I was figuring out. Now I'm going to display that on my histogram. I have my X and Y axes set up here, and because my intervals are the same size, 10 numbers each, I'm going to go ahead and make my interval visual the same width as well. And I'm going to label each one of these with the interval it's covering. So my X values here along the bottom are going to be my scores from 60 up through 100. And then on the side, on my Y value, I'm actually going to write the word frequency because we're going to show how often there were scores in that interval. According to my frequency table, there was just one number, so I'm going to go up to 1 here, that was somewhere up from 60 until 70, right? So this marking means it goes until 70. And I'm just going to go ahead and color that in a little bit here. Then I know that there were 5 numbers that started at 70 and stopped just before 80, right? Went to 79. So I'm going to go up here to 5 and then over across and back down. And I just like to shade these in because it makes it a little clearer to see that that's all one big chunk. There were 6 that started at 80 and stopped before 90. So I'm going to make that nice and tall. And lastly, there were 7 numbers that started at 90 and went up all the way up to 99, just before 100, right? And I'll fill that in as well, right? So that's my visual now that shows the test scores. And I'm just going to throw a title on there, of course, as well, because all my graphs need to have a title. So science test scores will work. This is a nice visual to see where most of the data is sort of clustered, where it all sort of hangs out. I find it's much easier to see this as an overview than to look at a long list of data. All right, you're going to try to make one yourself, but I'm going to give you a lot of guidance here. So I have some temperatures from December, and we're just going to go ahead and put these into a frequency table, or I'm going to help you set up the frequency table so that you can create that with your histogram. I think the hardest part about histograms is determining an appropriate interval. So I went ahead and helped you with that. I'm doing intervals of 5, right? 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So they takes up 5 numbers on a number line for each of these intervals. So you can go ahead and use those intervals and complete the frequency with which you see numbers that fit into those intervals. And then once you have your frequency table, I went ahead and helped you set up your histogram outline as well. You're going to use that to fill in the bars that represent the frequencies of temperatures. So remember, the essential question of this video was, what is a histogram and how do we make one? You've had a chance to see me make one, and I've helped you get started on one for you to make on your own. And of course, we'll keep practicing this together in class.